Good morning, everybody. We are here in one of our podcasts for Avenues International. And today we are inviting here Dr. Jess Campbell. He is a professor at Auburn University, and also he is part of the National Poultry Technology Center. This is a center under the engineering department at that university, biological and agricultural engineering department over there. And through several years, they have been helping the poultry industry in the US and internationally with knowledge and training related with housing practices in the broiler industry mainly, but also in many other areas of production. And just to introduce Dr. Campbell, he is not an engineer. He's actually from poultry science and a background with a family in the poultry business, poultry farmers. But also he's has an interesting training is a PhD in education. And this differentiates Dr. Campbell in his activities because he has this facility and skills to reach people. And because of that, we have invited him today to give us his opinions about training personnel for the poultry industry. And this is a very critical aspect of any production sector, but especially in agriculture, especially in integrated poultry industry where we need to deal with different groups that may have a slightly different interests, but all work together to provide the best protein product that we can offer to the public to feed them as poultry meat. Then Dr. Campbell has been doing trainings for the technical personnel of the integrated companies, but also he has worked with growers, and they also work with students from veterinary colleges or high schools or even undergrads from different universities. So with this great experience, I welcome you, Jess. And we would like to ask you first, what type of training programs do you offer to the poultry service technicians? And later we will go through the other groups.
Yeah, thank you, Edgar. I appreciate the introduction. I hope everyone's doing well. I do have a different background, so sometimes I look at training a little different than the traditional methods. We typically try to train our poultry growers and our poultry technicians on the farm with birds, but with biosecurity practices these days and the threat of disease outbreaks. Typically what we try to do is we find it best to do those type of training seminars in the field, in operating poultry houses, at their poultry company or the poultry growers' actual facilities. That is a big challenge these days, especially with birds. It works best with birds for people that are inexperienced, but we try to do farm training also without birds so that service technicians and poultry growers can learn how to diagnose and adjust ventilation systems, heating system, plumbing, and electrical systems to be able to see the actual equipment, how to measure the performance of that equipment, and how to make adjustments without birds in the farm too, so they're comfortable without damaging the birds and without exposing them to anything. So we typically find it best to do the trainings on farms. If that is not possible, and today almost every training seminar is different, we have built what we call, Edgar mentioned it, the National Poultry Technology Center, which is a 66-foot wide building, 250-foot long, that is totally dedicated to training It has all of the poultry equipment inside the building, so we can simulate almost anything that you could do on a poultry farm in that facility, and you don't have to worry about biosecurity. The students don't have to worry about tearing up equipment or messing something up, so they get real hands-on experience. And that goes for the poultry companies and the poultry growers also. We have training seminars open to anybody in the United States. We host international programs, but we will also do that for company-specific trainings too, so that companies don't have to worry about competing company representatives or anything like that. So we typically do it however anybody wants it, but we find the farm training works the best, whether it's on the company farms or in our demonstration facility.
Great, yes. And the hands-on experience is definitely fundamental in order that people grasp all those skills to address housing in the poultry industry. And the people that deal daily with this are the growers. And I understand you also do some grower training. So then they have their own farm, they know some of their equipment. But let me ask you, how do you do that training programs for growers, for poultry growers, for farmers? And since they already are very familiar with some of their equipment, how do you address that? And what are the differences in those trainings? Well,
yeah, good question. 20 years ago, we used to host regional farm meetings where we would find a farm that was out of birds and maybe that was going to have some equipment upgrades that would have an extended downtime. We would host 40 or 50 growers and we could train on a farm like that. But today, usually those training seminars are on one particular farm without other growers. Usually that's with company oversight, and we'll troubleshoot on the farm if there's a problem. We do some virtual training, but most poultry growers today, it's difficult to get them with the internet availability and the technical expertise that it takes to do virtual training is sometimes difficult. Not so much for the newer growers, but we do have growers that will attend open grower meetings in our demonstration facility at Auburn University. So it kind of varies. It's very difficult to do one-on-one training for every grower, but sometimes that the companies will invite us in and try to help get us to train and troubleshoot some of those problems. So it is more difficult to do grower trainings. I would say the majority of grower trainings that we do today are in a classroom, in a convention center somewhere. And unfortunately, it's a PowerPoint presentation, or we'll sit down with a whiteboard or a chalkboard and we'll try to do the training that way. So probably not as much hands-on from a biosecurity standpoint and just the sheer restrictions that we have from traveling and things like that.
yeah. Well, we can move on to another area that are related with these trainings, that are the common issues and difficulties that you may see training each one of these groups. And of course, growers, as you already mentioned, some of those challenges, but what are other aspects in their background and on their educational background, probably that you will differentiate between growers and tech people? How do you address them? So that will be is interesting because it's a very diverse group. So what are your experience about that?
Yeah, you're right. It is a very diverse group. Today, oftentimes we see poultry growers, you kind of have a range. We have a lot of new poultry growers that are in their early 20s. We also have, in a lot of those meetings, poultry growers that in their early 70s or mid 70s. So you've got a 50-year range of producers in one meeting. From an educational standpoint, it is difficult to try to hit that range. The newer age producers are tech savvy. They're very good with the internet. They're very good with smartphones and using calculators or apps to help calculate things on the farm. On the flip side of that, most producers that are in their mid 70s or 50 years or older sometimes are challenged with internet, challenged with technology, challenged with apps and smartphones. And so when we do training programs, we have to keep that in mind. So we will offer digital internet things that you can use, apps, but we also have to hand out newsletters and do some of those calculations and things there on the whiteboard and slow and simple when they're in the classroom. So it is sometimes a challenge to hit that 50-year age group range and communicating with those producers. Of course, biosecurity is always an issue. We're growing more chickens with less producers these days. The same thing goes with poultry companies. Turnover is a problem. Finding labor on poultry farms is a problem. So sometimes hosting a training seminar, it's hit or miss whether those producers will be able to attend or not because they're running their business also. So I would say biosecurity, time, and age are the biggest challenges that I have today.
Very good. And related with the tech personnel, getting away a little bit from that part of the biosecurity part, we also have people that come through the poultry industry that have either some technical training and some formal education from the universities, and others that actually come from other business. But companies hire them because they are good at communicating. They may have some previous non-formal contact with the poultry industry. Sometimes they come from poultry farms or from poultry areas where due to their contacts with different business, they have been related with poultry, and then they become technicians in poultry growers areas. We seldom, at least in the US, we seldom have veterinarians that will do these poultry service type things that we are talking about, since we are addressing an international industry, and in many places the veterinarians do part of this work. In the US, this is a technical group that has all these diverse trainings and backgrounds, and then they come and they face a variety of equipment, and anyway the industry keeps growing and bringing new type of equipment, and sometimes we forget the basics that also is something that you address in your trainings. So let's go to that group. What are the challenges, the common challenges to train that people? What do you think that we are missing probably in universities, or even the poultry companies should be checking on the type of basics that they need to know before they start a job? What do you think that are some missing information that will be very valuable for them to know to be able to work better in the industry, and what you find with them?
Yeah, that's an excellent question and very difficult to master. I feel like you have to keep an open mind when you're training. 20 years ago, I would say the average years of experience in poultry would have been easily 7 to 10 years from a live production servicing standpoint. Today, I would say it's probably closer to 2 years to 3 years. Oftentimes, when we host training seminars, you have someone that may have come from poultry or have their own poultry farm for some of those companies that will allow producers to also work for the company. So those usually are the more experienced people, and also usually ones that turn out to be very good technical trainers for the rest of that group. But then we also have people that have been there for a week or a month. And so I still prefer to train on farms, because when you have someone that it did not come from agriculture, especially not poultry, it is very technical, and those hard skills, learning ventilation, learning the different electronic controllers, learning the heating system. So it is best usually still to train on the farm or in their complex if you can. We try to lay the foundation for those basics, learning how to calculate the ventilation and heating systems, and learn how they work together and the importance of airflow and things like that. But typically, if we do have some of those older, experienced technicians, we kind of help bring those personnel up to speed, and then put some of that training on them together, and team those groups up, come up with some team building exercises where you mix the older experienced personnel in with the new trainees, and get there on the farm and allow them to manipulate the equipment and get some real hands-on training. So you're right, that is a difficult one. Sometimes from a poultry service technician, the companies will come up with a training program that is a tiered system. So we have done training programs where a certain company will say, we want 3 different types of training seminars. We want a beginners for maybe 2 years or less for those employees that don't have the experience and are still training. Then we'll have like a mid-level group, maybe 2 to 5 years, and then a more experienced, higher level training program for someone that's maybe 7 to 10 or 15 years. However, I have had some experienced, I would call them friends of mine, who we have trained for many years, and confess that, hey, maybe I wasn't paying as good attention, and maybe I've been doing things wrong for 15 or 20 years. So, but a lot of those experienced personnel came up in older buildings. Some of them have not grasped the new technologies, the computers, the controllers. So you have a diverse group of experience, and then you also have 30 and 40-year-old poultry houses with no controllers that are still in operation, and then in the same complex you have brand new farms. So it is a challenge. It keeps me on my toes and our group, but I think you have to sprinkle in every electronic training, hands-on training. But I feel like at the end of the day, the more hands-on training kind of appeals to every group, so to speak. It speaks many different languages. It's very important to be able to see it, put your hands on it, and you can hear the theory and you can practice the theory. I feel like that works better, and it has for us.
Very good. Now, with all these trainings that you have done through the years, and the experience working with the growers and the technicians, what are the knowledge that would poultry service technicians and also the growers will benefit the most to be successful in their jobs? What do you feel that are those areas, like key areas, where they need to make more emphasis, where we work in the cooperative extension in the different states, and even the companies should put more attention, and in order that they are more successful?
Right. That's I would say probably math skills. If I had to pick a few topics, math, science, and economics would probably be my top 3. Sometimes it surprises me. Even I have younger kids, teenage kids, and just to be able to sit down and calculate the amount of fan power that it takes to get a certain wind speed, the number of heaters. Sometimes I find that to be a challenge in the younger generations. But any generation, myself included, I try to learn something every time, a new way to calculate. But math, science, and economics, mixing chemicals, understanding bird physiology, and sometimes maybe cutting a corner on heating or ventilation, and how important it is to not or to understand that you can't lower the temperature and you can't run lower ventilation rates without there being a negative effect from the physiology of the bird and the health of that bird and the environment of the bird. Sometimes it's difficult to explain and put an emphasis on what that does to the flock. And then also from an economic standpoint, both with the producers and with the service technicians, to be able to kind of put in perspective, hey, we have so much money tied up from the birds and the feeds and the hatcheries and all of this. And then the same thing from a producer. We've got millions of dollars invested, and sometimes it's kind of hard to put all of those things into perspective and understand that at the end of the day, the producer has to make money, the company has to make money, and sometimes the choices that both parties make may not be the best in the long run. So that's what I would say. Math, science, and economics would be my top three.
Very good topics. Yeah, every university and community college and all technical services, they tend to do that. Definitely, we need to probably put it on a more practical way, more not only living on the calculations, but how they apply it. And when they see a real life situation, they get those basic knowledge that they have been acquiring in the different levels of education to a practical standpoint. Probably that's an important aspect, and in the same way be able to understand the impact on the economical system. But there is another area where most of the time we are seeing a more difficult issue on the relation part, on the other part that is dealing with the real life, and dealing with these differences in age and the constant change that you will find in any part of the world, but also is more common in agriculture, where we deal with weather, with animals. So that requires what we call non-technical skills of soft skills. And even that probably you are not a center for that, because you are on the technology, but transferring technology means in some way to deal with communication and with those soft skills. So then let's check what are your experiences on what type of soft skills challenges or areas of improvement that they can improve, that you have witnessed working with poultry growers and service techs.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you, Edgar. I would say probably my top one would be communication skills. Poultry companies do a very good job of documentation. They have a lot of forms. We're collecting a lot of data. Oftentimes the communication between the producer and the company is written, but it's more of a checklist or a form with blanks filled out. I find a lot of problems, conflict resolution, or problems that arise just from poor communication, whether it's from the company or the producer, or on both parties a lot of times. When you have a young technician that may have come, for example, from Auburn University or North Carolina State or Georgia or anywhere, they've got a very good education. It's difficult for a young college graduate that understands some of the basics and the foundations to go to a poultry farm and manage a producer who's been growing chickens for longer than that service technician has been alive, 30 or 40 or 50 years more experience. You have to be dedicated for communication, verbal, written, and oftentimes that miscommunication is basically the whole root of the problem. Misunderstandings happen a lot. A lot of producers, older growers, don't use text messaging, and then from a college graduate, that's probably the primary method of communication. So I would say keeping an open mind and being able to communicate verbally, written, text, and smartphone, and being able to understand that maybe when there's a change from a company and it has to be translated to the grower base, there needs to be several forms of communication. It needs to be written, it needs to be documented, but understanding that not everybody communicates the same. You kind of have to be open and willing to be able to have those tough conversations, or being able to set aside the time from a time management to say, hey, Mr. Producer, we've got this change, and this is what it means for you. This is what it means for the company, and open up those avenues to where the producers are comfortable communicating and speaking freely. So I would say communication is number one. Number two, I would say documentation. The companies do a very good job documenting things, but sometimes producers don't take the time to document. Let's take maintenance, for example, on equipment. They have a lot of details. They have to manage a lot of equipment that has to be managed. And I feel like sometimes having checklists documented, where fans have been maintained, heaters, drinkers, all of the equipment, the structures, anything to do with the farm. I sometimes think that they would benefit if they had some help from, having better documentation on the farm. Let's see. Another one would probably be being able to research and problem solve, maybe from a company standpoint. Younger technicians, and I deal with it with my teenagers today, where if they have a problem, sometimes, and I guess you could put younger growers into that same category. I find that oftentimes when I get a call or when I'm training, the younger generations want to have the answers given to them instead of them having to look for it or research for it or study for it. So I feel like being able to learn how to be more self-directed learning, taking the initiative and taking the ownership to where they see the problem, they communicate with the grower, and they come up with a solution together. Without having to just stop and either not follow through with the troubleshooting or just accept that something doesn't work. Of course, that takes time and that takes effort also. So those would be my soft skills that I would focus on.
Very good. And finally, probably we would like to ask you, why did you choose to work in poultry education? What is do you think that this is an interesting area of work?
Yeah, thank you. I have a lot of passion for farmers. Growing up, I always had a great respect for people that could make a living on farms. They have a lot of risk involved. Just because you put in the money, you put in the work, and you put in the effort doesn't necessarily mean that you get a favorable outcome. I always had a lot of respect for that. But my father built a farm when I was in my early stages of college, and I watched the poultry farm built, and it intrigued me of the engineering and the equipment and the investment that the farmer had to put in to produce chicken. Same thing for the company. There's a lot of moving parts. And it amazes me how today that we can take the ingredients, the feed, and the relationship and the farms, and we put it all together, and that it works to produce and feed the world. So I have a lot of passion for that. And at the end of the day, whether it's in Alabama or North Carolina or U.S. or all over the world. Chicken is a cheap source of protein, and we're helping feed the world together. So I just love poultry, and I love the company, and enjoy training. Every day's new. Even if I'm the person doing the training, I learn something every time. So I would say that some of the things that we train didn't always come from a university. A lot of times it came for the Purdue. Those growers are very creative thinkers. Same thing with companies that the personnel that have a lot of experience. So it's a team effort. Training is truly a team effort. Research is a team effort, and extension also. So thank you for that question, Edgar.
Well, we see this when we see you presenting and doing your work on trainings, and we share the same passion to help the poultry industry in the U.S. and worldwide. And here in Avenues International, we thank you for your participation, and we hope to have you as a writer in the different technical articles, and probably in a future podcast or webinar related with this topic. We will continue improving in these terms of training and disseminating knowledge and how to improve in the different areas that will make this poultry industry great and keep growing around the world. Thanks to everybody for your attendance today, and I hope to see you in a future Avenues podcast. Bye.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I always love working with you.
Thank you.